The wind howled through the dead pine groves like a widow's lament, carrying dust and grit across the barren landscape of Black Ridge County. The year was 1889, and the American West stretched endlessly beneath a merciless sun, its rocky terrain scarred by wagon trails that cut through the earth like old wounds. Here, where the land was as unforgiving as the men who tried to tame it, survival meant more than living. It meant enduring. Silas McGraw stood on the porch of his weathered cabin, squinting against the afternoon glare. At 38, he looked older, his face carved by wind and grief into hard angles and deep lines. His hands, calloused from years of ranch work, gripped the porch railing as he watched a dust cloud approaching from the east. Another wagon passing through, heading toward dreams that would likely die in this harsh country. He spat tobacco juice over the railing and turned back inside. The cabin was as sparse as the man who inhabited it. A few pieces of handmade furniture, a stone fireplace, and shadows where a woman's touch had once softened the edges. Sarah's rocking chair still sat by the window, covered in dust. Little Emma's rag doll remained on the mantel, its button eyes staring at nothing. 5 years gone, and Silas hadn't moved a thing. The coffee was bitter and cold, but he drank it anyway, staring at the letter on his rough-hewn table. His neighbor, Tom Brennan, had suggested it during their last trip to town. "Get yourself a mail-order bride. Silas, man wasn't meant to live alone." Silas had scoffed at first. He didn't need another woman to lose, but as winter approached and his joints ached more each morning, as the silence grew heavier and the chores multiplied, practicality won over pride. He didn't need love. He needed help, someone to cook, mend clothes, tend the chickens while he worked the cattle, someone who wouldn't expect soft words or gentle touches. He'd written the advertisement himself, his handwriting as blunt as his words. Rancher seeks capable woman for matrimony. Must cook, clean, and manage household. No romantic notions necessary. Board and protection provided. 300 miles east, in a cramped boarding house that smelled of boiled cabbage and desperation. Eleanor May Hutchinson, Ellie to the few who bothered with familiarity, read the advertisement for the third time. Her thick fingers traced the words, lips moving slightly as she sounded them out. At 26, she was considered well past marriageable age, especially with her sturdy build and sun-darkened skin that marked her as working class. No romantic notions necessary. The words stung less than they should have. Romance was for pretty girls with tiny waists and pale skin, not for someone built like a draft horse, as her former employer had so delicately put it before dismissing her. Mrs. Pemberton had made it clear. No respectable household wants a maid who looks like she could wrestle the master. And that face, well, it's unfortunate, dear. Ellie touched the faded bruise on her jaw, a parting gift from Harold Pemberton's wandering hands and her subsequent refusal. She'd fought him off, but it had cost her position and her reputation. No one believed the plain, sturdy maid over the son of a prominent merchant. Now, with her savings dwindling and winter approaching, the prospect of a loveless marriage to a stranger seemed almost appealing. She studied her reflection in the cracked mirror above her narrow bed. Square jaw, broad shoulders, hands rough from years of lye soap and scrubbing. Her mother had always said she had good bones, but bones didn't make a woman beautiful. Her brown eyes held kindness, but men didn't look that deep. They saw the thick waist, the arms that could haul water buckets without strain, the face that would never launch ships or inspire poetry. But she could cook, Lord above. She could cook like her mother before her, and her grandmother before that. Her apple pie had once made a traveling preacher weep with joy. Her biscuits could soften the hardest heart. If this rancher wanted capability over beauty, she could offer that in abundance. The letter she wrote was simple and honest. "Sir, I am a woman of 26 years, experienced in all household matters. I am strong, capable, and accustomed to hard work. I make no claims to beauty but can promise good meals and a well-kept home. I seek only respectful treatment and a chance for honest living. If these terms suit, I await your response. Respectfully, E. Hutchinson." She didn't mention the bruises or the accusations. She didn't speak of the nights spent crying into her thin pillow, wondering if she'd die alone and unmourned. She simply folded the letter, sealed it with borrowed wax, and posted it before fear could change her mind. When Silas received her response, he read it twice. No flowery language, no false promises, no included photograph claiming beauty that would disappoint upon arrival. Just simple facts from someone who understood the transaction. He appreciated the honesty. His reply was equally brief. Terms acceptable. Train ticket enclosed. S. McGraw. The morning Ellie left, rain pelted the boarding house windows like thrown stones. She packed her few belongings, 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, a wooden spoon worn smooth by generations of use, and carefully wrapped in old newspaper, her grandmother's handwritten recipe book. Everything she owned fit in one small trunk. At the train station, she overheard 2 women whispering, "The Hutchinson girl, headed west to marry some stranger. Desperate times." Their pitying looks followed her onto the train. As the locomotive pulled away, belching black smoke into the gray sky, Ellie pressed her face to the window. The familiar streets disappeared, replaced by farmland, then forests, then endless plains. With each mile, her old life faded like morning mist. She wasn't running toward love. She'd abandoned such foolish dreams years ago. She was running toward survival, toward a place where her past couldn't follow, where her worth might be measured in pies and clean floors rather than pretty faces and slim figures. Meanwhile, Silas prepared his home with the same practical efficiency he applied to branding cattle. He cleared space in the wardrobe, added a new rope to the bed frame, and removed the more personal reminders of Sarah, her hairbrush, her Sunday hat, the half-finished embroidery. Emma's things he left untouched. Some wounds were too deep to probe. He told Tom Brennan about the impending arrival, enduring the man's good-natured ribbing. "Mail-order bride, eh? Hope she's prettier than your last horse." "Don't need pretty," Silas had replied. "Need useful." But late at night, smoking his pipe on the porch, he wondered what kind of woman would answer such an advertisement. Desperate, certainly. Probably homely. Definitely practical. He tried not to think about soft skin or gentle touches. Sarah had been beautiful, and beauty had brought nothing but pain. When the fever took her and Emma, all her loveliness couldn't save them. The townspeople's whispers about witchcraft and curses had driven the final nails into his heart's coffin. No, he decided, crushing out his pipe. Better to have someone plain and sturdy. Someone who wouldn't remind him of what he'd lost. Someone who understood that this was a business arrangement. Nothing more. The land around Blackridge knew nothing of human hopes or fears. It simply endured, baking under summer sun, freezing under winter snow, eternal and indifferent. Soon, 2 damaged souls would meet in its vast emptiness, bringing their scars and secrets, their modest dreams of survival, and perhaps, though neither dared imagine it, something more might grow in that harsh soil, something as unexpected and resilient as prairie grass after rain. The stagecoach lurched violently, throwing Ellie against the hard wooden side for the 10th time since leaving the train station at Cedar Falls. Her fellow passengers, a thin merchant's wife with pinched features and her 2 unruly children, had long since ceased hiding their stares and whispers. "Mama, why's that lady so big?" the younger boy asked, pointing with sticky fingers. "Hush, Timothy," his mother scolded, though her eyes raked over Ellie with undisguised curiosity. "It's impolite to comment on the unfortunate appearances of others." Ellie kept her eyes fixed on the landscape rolling past the window, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The merchant's wife had claimed the better seat immediately upon boarding, relegating Ellie to the spot where every bump and rut in the road jolted through her spine. 4 hours of this journey remained, and already her muscles ached from bracing against the coach's violent movements. "Going to meet your husband?" the woman ventured after another mile of dusty silence. "Yes, ma'am." Ellie's voice came out hoarse from the trail dust. "How modern. I suppose the frontier requires certain sacrifices of standards." The woman's thin lips pursed as if she'd tasted something sour. "Still, One must wonder what manner of man resorts to catalog shopping for a wife. The older boy giggled. Maybe he's ugly too. Heat flooded Ellie's face, but she held her tongue. She'd learned long ago that defending herself only prolonged the torment. Instead, she reached into her carpet bag and withdrew her mother's Bible, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. The familiar texture steadied her nerves. The stagecoach driver's shout interrupted her thoughts. Black Ridge Station! 30 minutes! Ellie's stomach clenched. Through the dust-caked window, she glimpsed the town, if it could be called that. A handful of weathered buildings huddled against the endless brown landscape, like sheep seeking shelter. The main street was more dust than road, punctuated by horse droppings and wagon ruts. This was to be her new home. As they rolled closer, she spotted a figure standing beside the station platform. Even from a distance, she could see he was tall, lean in the way of men who worked hard and ate simple. He stood perfectly still, arms crossed, hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. Silas McGraw, waiting for his mail-order bride. The coach groaned to a stop, and the driver scrambled down to help his passengers disembark. The merchant's wife sailed past Ellie, gathering her skirts dramatically to avoid any contact. The children followed, the older boy making exaggerated gagging sounds as he passed. Ellie emerged last, her legs trembling from the long confinement. The step down was high, and she stumbled slightly, catching herself against the coach's side. A snicker came from somewhere. More townspeople had gathered to witness the spectacle of Silas McGraw's new woman. She straightened, smoothing her travel-worn dress with as much dignity as she could muster, and turned to face her future husband. He was studying her with eyes the color of winter sky, cold, assessing, giving nothing away. His face might have been carved from the surrounding rock, all sharp angles and weathered planes. When he spoke, his voice matched his appearance. Rough, sparse, direct. Miss Hutchinson. Yes, sir, Mr. McGraw? He nodded once, his gaze traveling from her dusty boots to her wilted bonnet. She saw the exact moment disappointment settled into his features, a slight tightening around his mouth, a subtle shift in his stance. She'd seen that look too many times to mistake it. Your trunk? Just the one. She gestured to the small battered case the driver was unloading. Without another word, Silas hefted it onto his shoulder as if it weighed nothing and strode toward a wagon waiting nearby. Ellie followed, keenly aware of the eyes tracking their progress. Whispers rose like dust devils in their wake. Lord have mercy, she's built like a plow horse. Poor Silas, ordering sight unseen. Betty's wishing he'd spent the extra penny for a photograph. The wagon was utilitarian, like everything else about Silas McGraw. He'd placed a folded blanket on the bench seat, the only concession to her comfort, after securing her trunk in the bed. He offered his hand to help her climb up. His palm was rough as tree bark, his grip firm but impersonal, releasing hers the moment she was seated. The ride to the ranch took 2 hours through increasingly desolate country. Silas drove in silence, eyes fixed on the rutted track ahead. Ellie stole glances at his profile, trying to read something, anything, in that stone face. Her letters had prepared her for a practical arrangement, but the reality of sitting beside this grimly silent stranger, knowing she would share his home and eventually his bed, sent waves of panic through her chest. Finally, she could bear it no longer. Your advertisement mentioned you were a rancher? Cattle? Some cattle, horses mainly. I see. And the house? How many rooms? 4. Kitchen. Main room. 2 bedrooms. 2 bedrooms. She exhaled quietly in relief. I rise at dawn, he continued, still not looking at her. Breakfast should be ready by first light. Dinner at sundown. Washing on Mondays. Mending when needed. Town trips once a month for supplies. Of course. More silence. Then, unexpectedly, you didn't send a likeness. No, sir, I thought... That is, I believed honesty would be best. I know I'm not what most men expect. He did look at her then, those winter eyes unreadable. Expectations are for fools. I need a housekeeper who can cook, nothing more. The words shouldn't have stung. She'd known what this was. yet something in the flat finality of his tone made her throat tight. She turned to study the landscape, blinking hard against the dust and the sudden prick of tears. The ranch, when it finally came into view, was exactly what she'd expected, and yet somehow worse. The house squatted in a valley between two ridges, built of rough logs chinked with mud. A few scraggly chickens pecked in the dirt yard. The barn looked more solid than the house, which told her everything about Silas McGraw's priorities. He pulled the wagon up beside the porch and climbed down, reaching back to help her descend. This time she was ready for the height and managed more gracefully. He retrieved her trunk and led the way inside. The main room was dim, furnished with the bare minimum: a table, 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the cold fireplace. But it was the details that made Ellie's heart constrict. A woman's shawl draped over the rocker, dried flowers in a cracked vase on the mantel, a child's slate propped in the corner, faint chalk marks still visible. "Your room." Silas pushed open a door to reveal a small space with a narrow bed, washstand, and hooks for clothing. "Was the storage room. Cleared it out yesterday." The mattress was fresh ticking, stuffed with straw, the quilt clean but patched. He'd tried, in his way, to make it welcoming. The effort touched her more than any fine furniture could have. "Thank you. It's perfectly suitable." He grunted and set her trunk at the foot of the bed. Kitchens through there, pumps out back for water, privies beyond the chicken coop. He paused in the doorway, seeming to struggle with something. "Supper would be appreciated, if you're not too tired." "Of course, I'll just need a moment to refresh myself." He nodded and disappeared, his bootsteps echoing through the thin walls. Ellie sank onto the bed, finally allowing her shoulders to slump. The journey was over, but what stretched ahead seemed just as daunting. She opened her trunk and carefully unwrapped her treasures. Her mother's Bible went on the washstand, the wooden spoon and recipe book she would take to the kitchen. She changed from her travel-stained dress into her second-best calico, still worn but cleaner, and splashed her face with water from the pitcher. The kitchen was better equipped than she'd expected. Cast-iron pots, a decent stove, even a pie safe in the corner. She explored the larder: salt pork, flour, lard, dried beans, preserves. And in a basket by the window, wrinkled but still good apples. Her spirits lifted slightly. She could work with this. As the sun slanted toward the western ridges, Ellie lost herself in the familiar rhythm of cooking. She mixed biscuit dough, set beans to simmer with chunks of salt pork, and carefully peeled the apples. Her grandmother's apple pie recipe didn't call for much. The secret was in the proportion of spices and the way you layered the fruit. The kitchen grew warm and fragrant. Through the window, she glimpsed Silas working with a horse in the corral, his movements sure and gentle despite his harsh demeanor. When he finally came in as shadows lengthened, he stopped in the doorway, nostrils flaring slightly. "Smells like—" He didn't finish, but something flickered across his face. Memory, perhaps, or pain. "Supper's ready. If you'd like to wash up first." He nodded and disappeared again, returning with damp hair and hands scrubbed red. They sat across from each other at the small table, the lamp casting a circle of yellow light between them. Ellie served the simple meal, watching anxiously as he took the first bite. He chewed slowly, his expression revealing nothing. Then he reached for a second biscuit. "These are good. Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "The pie should be cool enough after we finish, if you'd like some." His hand stilled halfway to his coffee cup. "You made pie." "Apple. I hope that's acceptable." Instead of answering, he applied himself to his meal with focused intensity. When she brought the pie to the table, slicing a generous portion onto his plate, he stared at it for a long moment before taking a bite. His eyes closed. The fork trembled slightly in his grip. When he opened them again, they were bright with something she couldn't name. "My Sarah," he cleared his throat roughly. "That is, pie is welcomed." He ate every crumb, then pushed back from the table. "Thank you for supper." He escaped to the porch, and soon she smelled pipe smoke. Ellie cleared the table, washed the dishes, and prepared for bed. Through her thin door, she heard him come in much later, his footsteps pausing outside her room before continuing to his own. She lay in the narrow bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, and whispered a prayer into the darkness. Not for love. She wasn't fool enough for that. Just for the strength to endure, to prove worthy of this chance at a new life. And maybe, if God was generous, for a man who might someday see past her plain face to the heart that beat beneath. Outside, a coyote howled at the rising moon, and the wind whispered secrets through the gaps in the walls. The first week passed like a held breath. Ellie rose before dawn each day, stoking the stove and preparing breakfast in the blue-dark kitchen. By the time Silas emerged from his room, coffee would be steaming and biscuits warming in the oven. He ate in silence, nodded his thanks, and disappeared into his work. She wouldn't see him again until supper, when the pattern repeated itself: quiet meal, brief acknowledgement, escape to the porch with his pipe. They moved around each other like wary animals sharing the same den, careful not to intrude on the other's space. Ellie learned his preferences without asking. Coffee black and bitter, eggs over easy, bacon crisp enough to shatter. He learned her rhythms too, though what he thought of them remained locked behind that stone face. On the 8th morning, Ellie found Tom Brennan sitting at her kitchen table when she emerged to start breakfast. The neighboring rancher was everything Silas wasn't, ruddy-faced, quick to smile, with laugh lines etched deep around friendly eyes. "You must be the new Mrs. McGraw," he said, rising politely. "Tom Brennan, from the Triple B spread next valley over. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Brennan. Though I'm Miss Hutchinson still. We haven't, that is, the formalities." "Ah." Tom's smile gentled. Silas always was one for taking his time. "Speaking of, where's the old bear?" "Already in the barn, I believe." "Course he is. Man works like he's trying to outrun the devil himself." Tom accepted the cup of coffee she offered, studying her over the rim. "How are you settling in?" "Well enough, thank you." "He's not the easiest man." "Our Silas. Been alone too long, maybe, but there's good in him, deep down. Just takes some digging to find it." Before Ellie could respond, bootsteps announced Silas's return. He filled the doorway, his expression darkening at the sight of his neighbor. "Tom. Morning, Silas. Just introducing myself to your lady. She's got work to do." Tom chuckled, unperturbed by the dismissal. "That's my cue to leave." He tipped his hat to Ellie. "Ma'am, you need anything, the Triple B is always happy to help. My Martha's been itching to meet you." After he left, Silas remained in the doorway, that winter gaze fixed on Ellie. "Tom Brennan talks too much. He seems kind. Kind don't get the work done." He grabbed a biscuit from the pan and headed back out, but paused at the door. "Don't need you gossiping with the neighbors. Got enough tongues wagging as it is." The words stung more than they should have. Ellie turned back to her stove, blinking hard. She'd thought they were finding a rhythm, but clearly she was just hired help who happened to sleep under his roof. That evening, she heard it, Silas's voice carrying through the thin walls as Tom Brennan returned for some ranching business. They sat on the porch, and she could make out every word through the open window as she mended one of Silas's shirts. "She's a good cook," Tom was saying. "Solid woman. She's not much to look at." Silas's flat statement drove ice through her chest. "But she can cook. I'll give her that. Looks ain't everything, friend." "No." "But a man has his pride. Bad enough I had to advertise for a woman like I was buying cattle. Worse that she's—" He didn't finish, but Ellie could fill in the blanks. Plain, homely, built like a draft horse. She set down the mending, her hands trembling. Through blurred vision, she stared at the wedding ring Silas had grudgingly provided, a simple band that had probably belonged to his first wife. Everything here had belonged to Sarah, the beautiful, beloved Sarah, whose ghost filled every corner of this house. That night, Ellie cried into her pillow, muffling the sounds so they wouldn't carry. She'd known what this was, known she wasn't pretty, known not to expect affection, but hearing it stated so baldly, like she was livestock that had disappointed at market, carved out something vital in her chest. The next morning, she served breakfast with downcast eyes and spoke only when necessary. If Silas noticed the change, he gave no sign. For 3 days, she moved through her duties like a ghost herself, efficient but silent, the joy she'd found in cooking replaced by mechanical duty. On the 4th night, a storm rolled in from the mountains. Thunder shook the little house, and lightning turned the world white and strange. The power of it knocked out their meager oil lamps, plunging everything into darkness. Ellie huddled in the kitchen, unable to sleep. She'd been attempting to read her mother's Bible by lamplight when the storm struck. Now she sat at the table, arms wrapped around herself, listening to the fury outside. She'd always feared storms, not the rain itself, but the violence of them. The way they stripped away safety and left you exposed. A floorboard creaked. Silas stood in the doorway, a shadow among shadows. "Power's out," he said unnecessarily. "Yes." He moved into the kitchen, navigating by touch and familiarity. She heard him rummaging in a drawer, then the scratch of a match. The small flame seemed brilliant after the absolute darkness. He lit a candle, the warm glow casting dancing shadows on his angular face. "You're afraid of storms?" It wasn't a question. She nodded, embarrassed by her weakness. To her surprise, he pulled out the chair across from her and sat. For a long moment, they existed in a bubble of candlelight while the storm raged beyond the walls. "Sarah was too," he said finally. "Used to hide in the root cellar till they passed. Your wife? 5 years dead come September." His fingers traced patterns on the scarred tabletop. "Her and little Emma both. Fever took them while I was driving cattle to market. Came back to 2 graves and a town full of whispers." "I'm sorry." He looked up sharply. "Don't want pity." "It's not pity. It's—" She searched for words. "It's understanding. Maybe loss leaves marks." "What do you know of loss?" The bitterness in his voice should have silenced her. Instead, something sparked. "I know what it's like to be alone, to be judged wanting, to have folks whisper behind their hands about how unfortunate you are." She met his gaze steadily. "I know what it's like to be someone's last resort." He flinched as if she'd slapped him. "I didn't mean—" "You did. And you were right. I'm not pretty. Never have been, never will be. But I'm here. Mr. McGraw. I left everything I knew to come here, to cook your meals and mend your clothes and try to make a life. Because even a plain woman deserves a chance at something better than being pawed at by her employer's son and then thrown out like trash when she fights back." The words hung between them, sharp as lightning. She hadn't meant to say so much, to reveal that particular shame, but the storm had stripped away her careful control. "Someone hurt you?" Again, not a question. "Someone tried. I stopped him. Cost me my position and my reputation, but I kept my dignity." She laughed bitterly. "For all the good it does a woman like me." Silas was quiet for so long she thought he might just leave. "Then, my grandmother used to make apple pie, back in Ohio, before we came west. She'd let me help peel the apples, taught me to cut them thin so they'd cook even." He stared at the candle flame. "Haven't tasted anything close to hers in 20 years, until the other night." Ellie blinked at the unexpected turn. "It was my grandmother's recipe too. She always said the secret was the spice blend," they said in unison. Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted. Not understanding exactly, not yet, but recognition. Perhaps 2 people carrying their ghosts, trying to build something from the ashes. "I'm not an easy man," Silas said quietly. "Lost too much to be easy, and I'm no good with soft things, gentle things. Don't know how to be anymore. I'm not asking for soft, just decent, just to be seen as more than an unfortunate necessity." He nodded slowly. "I can try for decent." The storm was passing, thunder grumbling away toward the eastern plains. In the flickering candlelight, Ellie saw something in his face she hadn't noticed before. Not just hardness, but the pain that had carved it there, like looking in a mirror. In a way. "I could heat some milk," she offered. "Sometimes it helps with sleep." That would be kind. She moved to the stove, grateful for something to do with her hands. As she worked, she felt him watching her, not with the cold assessment of before, but with something approaching curiosity. "You said you stopped him, the man who tried to hurt you." "Yes, good." That single word, fierce and approving, warmed her more than the stove. When she set the mug before him, their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. They sat in companionable silence, sipping warm milk like children taking comfort from a nightmare. When the candle burned low, Silas rose. "Storm's past. Should try to sleep." She nodded, gathering the mugs. At the doorway, he paused. "Ellie." Her name sounded rusty on his tongue, like he'd forgotten how to shape such sounds. "That pie. Would you... that is, if it's no trouble." "I'll make another tomorrow." The ghost of what might have been a smile touched his lips before he disappeared into the darkness of his room. Ellie stood in the kitchen, one hand pressed to her chest where something flickered. Not hope exactly, but maybe the ember that could become hope if carefully tended. Outside, the storm had washed the air clean, and stars began to peek through the breaking clouds. The world felt different somehow, as if the lightning had illuminated more than just the sky. Two damaged people, shadow walking around each other, had finally seen past their own pain long enough to recognize a kindred spirit. It wasn't love, it wasn't even affection yet, but it was a beginning. Something shifted after the storm. The silence between them became less hostile, more like the quiet of two people learning to exist in the same space. Ellie found herself humming while she worked, old hymns her mother had sung, folk tunes from her childhood. Sometimes she caught Silas listening from the doorway before he cleared his throat and moved on. She made apple pie twice that week. The first time, Silas ate 2 slices and actually thanked her with words instead of just a nod. The second time, she found him in the kitchen after supper, carefully covering the remaining pie with a dish towel. To keep it fresh, he explained gruffly, as if she might question his presence in her domain. "That's thoughtful." He shrugged and retreated, but not before she glimpsed what might have been embarrassment on his weathered face. The vegetable garden behind the house had been neglected for years, choked with weeds and gone to seed. Ellie stood surveying it one morning after breakfast, sleeves rolled up, when Silas appeared with a hoe and rake. "Thought you might want to bring it back," he said, handing her the tools. "Sarah always kept a garden, said store goods were never as good as fresh." "I'd like that." She accepted the hoe, testing its weight. What did she grow? Tomatoes, beans, squash, herbs for cooking. He gazed at the overgrown plot as if seeing ghosts among the weeds. Emma helped her, called it their secret garden, though weren't nothing secret about it. How old was Emma? 4, would have been 9 now. His jaw tightened. Fever took her first. Sarah followed 2 days later. Some say she died of grief much as sickness. Ellie's heart ached for him. She knew better than to offer empty platitudes. Instead, she bent to the earth and began clearing weeds. After a moment, Silas knelt beside her, working in companionable silence. They spent the morning that way, side by side in the dirt. When the sun climbed high, Ellie fetched water for them both. Silas drank deeply, then surprised her by pouring some over his handkerchief and offering it to her. "For your face. You've got dirt." She accepted the damp cloth, aware of how she must look, sweaty, soil-streaked, hair escaping from her bonnet. But Silas wasn't looking at her with disgust. If anything, his expression held something like approval. "You're not afraid of hard work?" "Never have been. Hard work is honest. It's people that complicate things." "That's true enough." He helped her to her feet, his hand lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "I've got to check the north pasture." But maybe we could work on this again tomorrow. I'd like that. The garden became their shared project. Each morning after chores, they'd spend an hour in the soil, planting rows, discussing what would grow best in the harsh climate. Silas knew the land, but Ellie knew plants. They made a good team. Old Moses, Silas's ancient bull, took a liking to Ellie. The massive creature would lumber to the fence whenever she passed, lowing softly for attention. She took to saving him apple cores and carrot tops. Fool animal, Silas said one afternoon, watching her scratch behind Moses's ears. Never took to anyone but Sarah before. He's just lonely. Knows a kind heart when he sees one. Do you think? Silas studied the bull, then her. Maybe you're right. The change in routine brought changes in Ellie too. She smiled more, laughed when the chickens chased her for feed, sang full-voiced while hanging laundry. The work was hard, harder than anything she'd done in the East, but it felt purposeful, needed. 3 weeks after her arrival, Silas announced they were going to town for supplies. Ellie's stomach knotted at the thought of facing those staring faces again, but she kept her concerns to herself. The town looked exactly as she remembered. Dusty, sparse, unwelcoming. But riding beside Silas on the wagon seat felt different than arriving alone. He helped her down in front of the general store, his hand steady on her elbow. I'll load feed. You get whatever's needed for the house. Inside, Mrs. Pritchard, the shopkeeper's wife, barely concealed her curiosity. Mrs. McGraw. How? Nice to see you again. Miss Hutchinson, Ellie corrected quietly, selecting flour and sugar. Still? How unusual. The woman's tone dripped false sympathy. Well, I suppose Silas always was particular. After Sarah, she was such a beauty, like an angel, really. We all thought he'd never, but then a man has needs, doesn't he? Even if he has to, compromise. Heat flooded Ellie's face, but she kept her voice steady. I'll need 10 pounds of coffee, too, and thread, if you have it, blue and brown. She was examining bolts of calico when rough hands seized her shoulders. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. She spun, raising her arm defensively, heart hammering. Well, Eleanor Hutchinson. The man was unfamiliar, but the look in his eyes wasn't. That calculating assessment, like she was goods to be evaluated. He was rough-dressed, unshaven, with the smell of whiskey clinging to him. I don't believe we've met, sir. Name's Crawford. Came through Millstown few months back. Heard all about you from the Pemberton boy. Said you were a feisty one. Said you played hard to get, then cried assault when he tried to collect what you'd been promising. That's a lie. Her voice shook despite her efforts. Is it now? Crawford stepped closer, backing her against the fabric display. Way I heard it, you've got a taste for leading men on. Pemberton said. A hand fell on Crawford's shoulder. Hard. Silas stood there, quiet as death and twice as final. You'll step away from her now. Crawford turned, sneering. This ain't your business. McGraw. The lady is with me. That makes it my business. Lady? Crawford laughed. That's rich. You know what she... He never finished. Silas's fist connected with his jaw, sending him crashing into a display of canned goods. The store erupted in gasps and scattered conversations. Anyone else has something to say about my wife, they can say it to me. Silas's voice carried no heat, just iron-cold certainty. Outside, now! No one moved. Silas turned to Ellie, his expression gentling fractionally. You finished here? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. He gathered her purchases, left money on the counter, and guided her out with a hand on her back. The crowd parted before them like water. They rode in silence until the town disappeared behind them. Then Silas pulled the wagon to a stop beside a cluster of cottonwoods. You're shaking. She hadn't realized until he said it. Her whole body trembled like leaves in a storm. I'm sorry. I've brought trouble to your door. That man, Crawford, he knows Harold Pemberton. If he spreads those lies here... Stop. Silas turned to face her fully. You've got nothing to apologize for. Man like that, spreading filth, he's the one who should be sorry. But your reputation, my reputation? He laughed, harsh and short. You think I care what those gossips say? They whispered Sarah was a witch, said she cursed the town, that's why the fever came, said I probably killed her myself when I got tired of her spells. His hands clenched on the reins. Let them talk. Words don't change truth. You called me your wife. The anger faded from his face, replaced by something uncertain. Seemed simpler, unless, that is, if you object. I don't object. They looked at each other. Truly looked. Maybe for the first time. Not employer and housekeeper. Not two people settling for less than they'd hoped. Just Silas and Ellie. Battered by life but still standing. We should make it true then, he said quietly. Legal. Preacher comes through next month, if you're willing. Is that what you want? I want. He struggled. This man unused to expressing want. I want to come home to apple pie. I want Moses to have someone who saves him treats. I want that garden to bloom again. And I want anyone who tries to hurt you to know they'll answer to me. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't poetry or promises of devotion. But it was real. And from Silas McGraw, it was everything. Yes, Ellie whispered. He nodded, clicked to the horses, and they continued home. As they crested the ridge above the ranch, Ellie looked back toward town, then forward to the little house waiting in the valley. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. I'll teach you to ride, Silas said suddenly. Proper riding, not just sitting a horse. And when we go to town next, you'll ride beside me. Let them see you belong here. I'd like that. Good. He paused. That pie you made yesterday? Is there any left? She smiled. The first real smile since Crawford had grabbed her. I might have hidden a piece or two. Hidden? Behind the preserves. Figured you'd go looking. He glanced at her, and she could swear she saw his lips twitch. Smart woman. As they pulled up to the house, Moses bellowed a greeting from his pen. The chickens scattered before them, and the last light of day caught on the windows like a welcome. It wasn't the life Ellie had imagined as a girl, dreaming of romance and beauty, but it was becoming her life, built on small kindnesses and shared silences, on apple pie and garden dirt and the promise of protection. That night, as she served supper, Silas caught her hand. Thank you, he said. For the pie, for Moses, for staying. She squeezed his fingers gently. Thank you for standing up for me. Always will. 2 words, simply spoken. But Ellie heard the vow in them, more binding than any fancy wedding ceremony. In this harsh land where survival meant everything, they'd found something worth fighting for, each other. The next morning brought unusual activity to the ranch. Silas had hired 2 hands to help with a horse drive, and they would stay for 3 days. As he explained this over breakfast, Ellie noticed tension in his shoulders. They're good men, but keep the house locked when I'm gone, and stay close to the yard. Of course. He hesitated at the door. If anyone comes calling while I'm away, I'll bar the door and wait for you. She tried to sound confident, though the memory of Crawford's hands still made her skin crawl. The ranch felt too quiet with Silas gone. Ellie threw herself into work, scrubbing floors, mending harnesses, baking bread for the men's return. But as afternoon shadows lengthened, unease prickled along her spine. The knock came at twilight, sharp and demanding. Through the window, she glimpsed a familiar figure and her blood turned to ice. Not Crawford, worse. Harold Pemberton himself stood on her porch, his city clothes dusty from travel, but his smirk perfectly polished. Eleanor, dear, aren't you going to invite an old friend inside? She kept the door barred, speaking through the gap. You're no friend of mine, Mr. Pemberton. Please leave. Such hostility, and here I've come all this way to check on your welfare. When Crawford told me he'd found you, I simply had to see for myself. His voice dropped to a whisper. Did you really think you could run far enough? I'm not running. This is my home. This hovel? He laughed. the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Oh, Eleanor, still playing the virtuous maiden. I see. We both know what you are. What you wanted that night in my father's study. I wanted nothing from you but to be left alone. Liar." He pressed closer to the door. "You led me on for months. All those smiles, those little touches when you served dinner, then you cry assault when I try to collect what you offered?" Ellie's hands shook, but her voice remained steady. "I was kind because it was my job. Nothing more. You attacked me. I tried to give you what you were begging for, but you had to make a scene, had to pretend outrage." His tone turned ugly. "Cost me my engagement. You know, Miss Worthington wouldn't have me after the scandal, all because a fat, ugly serving girl wanted to play innocent. Leave, now, or I'll—" "You'll what?" He slammed his palm against the door. "Cry to your husband. Oh yes, I know all about him. Silas McGraw, the cursed widower. Did he tell you how his first wife died? Some say he drove her to madness with his coldness. Others say worse. Get off my land. Your land. You're nothing but a mail-order embarrassment. How long before he tires of you? Before he realizes what I knew all along? That you're only good for one thing, and you're too proud to give even that freely?" Rage, pure and cleansing, flooded through her. Ellie lifted the bar and yanked the door open so suddenly that Harold stumbled backward. "You want to know what I'm good for?" She advanced on him. No longer the cowering maid. "I'm good for standing up to cowards who prey on women with no protection. I'm good for making a home in hard country. I'm good for looking at a damaged man and seeing worth where others see only shadows. You forget yourself. No, Mr. Pemberton, I finally remember myself." She stood tall, every inch of her sturdy frame radiating fury. "I remember I'm Eleanor May Hutchinson, daughter of good people, maker of excellent pies, and soon-to-be wife of a man who'd break you in half for speaking to me this way." Harold's face flushed purple. "You'll regret this. I'll tell everyone what you really are." "No one will—" The click of a rifle being cocked cut him off. Tom Brennan stood at the corner of the house, weapon trained steady. "Evening. Miss Hutchinson, this fellow bothering you?" "He was just leaving. Mr. Brennan." Tom smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Glad to hear it. Be a shame if he had an accident on these dark roads. Easy to get lost, or worse." Harold looked between them, calculating. Whatever he saw in Tom's face decided him. He backed toward his rented horse, jabbing a finger at Ellie. "This isn't over. Yes, it is." She spoke with quiet finality. "Don't come back. Harold, there's nothing for you here but trouble you don't want to find." He rode off in a cloud of dust and curses. Ellie's knees nearly buckled, but Tom's steady presence kept her upright. "Silas asked me to keep an eye on things," he explained. "Glad I did. You all right?" "I am now. Thank you. That fellow won't be back. I'll make sure of it." He tipped his hat. "You did good, ma'am. Stood your ground like a proper frontier woman." After he left, Ellie bolted the door and sank into a chair. Her hands trembled now that the danger had passed. But underneath the fear was something else. Pride. She'd faced her demon and hadn't broken. When Silas returned near midnight, dusty and exhausted, he found her asleep in the rocking chair, the rifle across her lap. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Ellie, what happened?" She woke with a start, then launched into the tale. As she spoke, his face grew darker, his hands clenching and unclenching. When she finished, he was silent for so long she worried he blamed her for bringing trouble. Then he crossed to where she sat and dropped to one knee, taking her hands in his. "Are you hurt?" "No. Tom came before. No. I should have been here. You couldn't have known, and I handled it." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm not the same frightened girl who ran from Millstown." He studied her face in the lamplight, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or admiration. "No, you're not." His thumb traced circles on her palm, the calloused skin creating friction that sent unexpected warmth through her. They stayed frozen like that, hands clasped, eyes locked, the air between them changing, thickening. "Ellie, He swallowed hard. "When Tom sent word about a stranger approaching the house, I rode back hard enough to kill my horse. The thought of anyone hurting you— Silas, I'm no good with words. Never have been, but these past weeks, having you here, the house feels alive again. I feel alive again." His voice roughened. "That scares me more than any man with a gun." She freed one hand to touch his face, feeling the stubble beneath her palm. "I scare you? The way I feel about you scares me. Sarah's dying nearly broke me. I swore I'd never—" He leaned into her touch. "But you make me forget my promises to stay numb." Maybe numbness isn't living. Maybe it's just existing. Maybe. He rose, pulling her to her feet. They stood close enough to share breath, close enough to feel the heat radiating from travel-worn clothes. "I need to wash up, but after— Would you sit with me, just for a while?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He disappeared to clean up, and she busied herself warming food she'd kept back. When he returned, hair damp and shirt fresh, they sat together on the small sofa before the banked fire. "Tell me about your family," he said. "Before all this." So she did. She talked about her parents' small farm, her mother's gentle wisdom, her father's quiet strength, about learning to cook at her grandmother's elbow, about summer evenings on the porch, about the dreams she'd had before life taught her to expect less. "I wanted to be a teacher once," she admitted. "Foolish, I know, but I loved books, loved learning. Thought maybe I could help children discover that same joy." "Why foolish? Look at me. What parent would want someone like me teaching their children? I accepted long ago that some dreams aren't meant for women like me." Silas was quiet for a moment. Then, "My Emma would have loved you. She was always asking questions, wanting to know how everything worked. Sarah used to say she'd drive us mad with her curiosity. Tell me about them, if it's not too painful." So he did, slowly, haltingly. He painted pictures of a laughing woman with golden hair who sang while she worked, of a little girl who collected rocks and insisted each one had a name, of picnics by the stream and bedtime stories and all the small moments that make a life. "The fever came fast," he said. "I wanted to go for the doctor, but Sarah begged me not to leave them, said it was too late anyway. So I held them both as they slipped away. Emma went first, just stopped breathing in her sleep. Sarah lasted 2 more days, burning up, calling for the baby." Ellie didn't speak, just shifted closer until their shoulders touched. "I buried them under the oak tree on the hill. The town wouldn't let them in the churchyard. Said Sarah had brought the curse on herself with her herbs and healing. Said she was a witch who'd meddled with dark forces." His laugh was bitter. "She grew herbs for cooking and made tonics for neighbor women's monthly pains. If that's witchcraft, then every grandmother's guilty. People fear what they don't understand. They killed her just as sure as the fever did. Their whispers, their turned backs. It broke her heart before the sickness could." Without thinking, Ellie took his hand, lacing their fingers together. He gripped back almost desperately. "I'm not good at this," he said, "at being gentle, at showing what I feel. Sarah used to tease that I courted her like I was breaking a horse, all patience and no poetry. I don't need poetry." "What do you need?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Ellie turned to face him fully, her free hand coming up to rest over his heart. "Just this, just truth between us, just kindness when you can manage it, and honesty when you can't." His heart beat strong beneath her palm. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned closer. His lips brushed hers, tentative, questioning. When she didn't retreat, he kissed her properly, not with passion yet, but with promise. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight. Not for that. Just stay. I don't want to wake up alone after almost losing you." She understood. The fear still hummed in her own veins. "Yes." They lay together on his bed, fully clothed above the covers, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her solid warmth. Outside, coyotes called to the stars, and the wind whispered secrets through the gaps in the walls. "Ellie? I'm glad you shot Harold Pemberton down. Glad you came west. Glad you make apple pie." She smiled against his shirt. "I'm glad too." They fell asleep like that. Two souls finding shelter in each other against the storms that had battered them both. It wasn't the passionate scene poetry might demand, but it was real. A quiet claiming of space in each other's lives. A promise that loneliness might finally loosen its grip. In the morning, they would wake tangled together, shy but not ashamed. They would share breakfast and chores and all the small moments that build a life. But for now, they simply held on, letting the steady rhythm of shared breathing chase away the shadows of all they'd survived alone. The morning after brought awkwardness neither quite knew how to navigate. They woke with first light, still tangled together, and pulled apart with mumbled apologies and averted eyes. Ellie fled to the kitchen while Silas escaped to morning chores, both grateful for the familiar routines that didn't require words. But something had fundamentally shifted. When their hands brushed passing the milk pail, both jerked back as if burned. When Silas came in for breakfast, he stood uncertainly in the doorway before taking his seat. The easy companionship they'd built over weeks seemed suddenly fragile, threatened by the new awareness crackling between them. For 3 days they danced around each other, excessively polite and careful. "Thank you kindly for the biscuits, Miss Hutchinson. You're very welcome, Mr. McGraw." It was Tom Brennan who finally broke the spell, arriving for supper and immediately sensing the strange tension. "Lord Almighty, you two act like strangers at a church social. What happened to the easy partnership I saw last week?" Ellie busied herself at the stove. Silas studied his coffee with intense focus. Tom looked between them and laughed. Finally figured out you're sweet on each other, did you? About time." "Tom," Silas warned, "don't Tom me. You've been mooning over this woman since she made that first pie, and Miss Ellie here gets a particular look when you walk in the room." He helped himself to more potatoes. "Martha and I have a bet on when you'll make it official. I've got money on before the harvest dance." Ellie dropped her serving spoon with a clatter. The harvest dance was only a month away. She risked a glance at Silas, who was glaring at his friend with murder in his eyes. "Didn't mean to speak out of turn," Tom said, not looking sorry at all. "Just seems foolish to waste time when life's so short. But what do I know? Only been married 20 happy years." After he left, whistling and clearly pleased with himself, Silas and Ellie stood in the kitchen avoiding each other's eyes. "I should explain," Silas began. "No need." "Yes, there is." He caught her hand as she tried to turn away. "I've been a fool these past days, acting like a green boy, afraid of his own feelings. We both have, maybe, but I'm done with it." He tugged her closer. "Tom's right. Life is short, too short to waste being afraid." He kissed her then, different from that tender exploration 3 nights past. This was hunger barely leashed. Weeks of loneliness and longing poured into the connection. Ellie responded with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt to anchor herself against the storm of sensation. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Silas pressed his forehead to hers. "Tell me to stop. Tell me this is too fast, too much. Don't stop." The words came out breathless but certain. "I've waited my whole life to feel wanted. Don't make me wait anymore." He made a sound that might have been her name or a prayer, then kissed her again. The kitchen faded away. The dirty dishes, the cooling stove, the everyday mundane details that usually filled their evening. There was only this, the heat between them, the rightness of finally touching after so many careful distances. "Not here," Silas managed when they broke for air again. "You deserve better than a kitchen fumbling. You deserve you," she finished. "I just need you." He led her to his room, their room now, she supposed, his hand trembling slightly in hers. Once there, urgency gave way to uncertainty. They stood beside the bed, the weight of what came next pressing down. I'm not... Ellie struggled with the words. My body isn't... I know I'm not what men dream of. Silas cupped her face in his work-rough hands. You're what I dream of, these past weeks. Watching you bring life back to this place. Seeing your strength. Ellie, you're the most beautiful thing I've seen in 5 years of darkness. You don't have to say that. I'm not good with pretty words. If I say something, I mean it. His thumb stroked her cheeks. Let me show you. Let me prove how beautiful you are to me. What followed was neither the brutal claiming Ellie had feared, nor the passionless duty she'd expected. Silas's hands shook as he unpinned her hair, letting the brown waves fall around her shoulders. He kissed each area of skin revealed as clothes fell away, murmuring appreciation for the strength in her arms, the softness of her curves, the capable beauty of her form, when nerves threatened to overwhelm her, when old voices whispered cruel words about her inadequacy. Silas chased them away with touch and truth. Perfect. He breathed against her shoulder. My Ellie, my salvation. The desert had taught him patience, and he applied it now, learning her responses, coaxing pleasure from her body until she forgot every reason she'd thought herself unworthy of desire. When they finally joined, it was with a rightness that brought tears to her eyes. Not pain, but the overwhelming relief of finding home in another person. Afterward, they lay entwined in the gathering darkness, sweat cooling on their skin. Ellie traced the scars on Silas's chest, marks from barbed wire, from horse hooves, from a life lived hard. Tell me about this one. Bull caught me when I was 20, nearly died. He caught her hand, kissing her fingers. Worth it to have your hands on me now. Silver tongue, she teased. Only with you. He grew serious. Ellie, I need you to know, this isn't just body hunger. What I feel, I know. And she did. It was in every careful touch, every reverent whisper, every moment he'd waited for her permission. They talked through the night, sharing stories and silences with equal comfort. When dawn approached, neither had slept, but both felt more rested than they had in years. We should make it legal soon, Silas said as pink touched the eastern sky. I want the whole territory to know you're mine, protected, cherished. Is that a proposal, Mr. McGraw? It's a promise, future Mrs. McGraw. He pulled her close. If you'll have me, bad temper, poor conversation, and all. I'll have you, especially if you'll have me. Apple pies, sturdy build, and all. Deal. They sealed it with a kiss that led to more. The morning chores forgotten in the face of newly discovered hunger. When they finally emerged from the bedroom, the sun was high and the chickens were squawking indignantly for their delayed breakfast. Demanding creatures, Ellie laughed, hurrying to dress. Let them wait. Silas caught her for one more kiss. Some things are more important than schedules. The shift in their relationship changed everything and nothing. They still worked side by side, still shared quiet meals and evening conversations. But now there were stolen kisses by the garden fence, lingering touches as they passed in doorways, nights of whispered endearments and passionate discovery. The house that had seemed so haunted when Ellie arrived began to fill with new life. She caught Silas smiling at nothing, humming tunelessly as he worked. He brought her wildflowers from the upper pasture, helped her plant herbs by the kitchen door, even started teaching her to ride as promised. You're a natural, he said one afternoon as she successfully guided the gentle mare around the corral. Took to it like you were born in the saddle. I had a good teacher. She beamed down at him, flushed with success and something more. Silas, I love you. The words slipped out unplanned. She immediately wished she could call them back, afraid they were too much, too soon, but his face transformed, years of hardness melting away to reveal the young man he'd been before grief carved him hollow. Say it again. I love you. He reached up, lifted her from the saddle as if she weighed nothing, and spun her around. Her laughter rang across the valley like church bells. I love you too, Ellie McGraw. Have since you served me that first slice of pie and looked at me like I was worth the effort. They were married 2 weeks later when the circuit preacher came through. Tom and Martha Brennan stood as witnesses, and half the territory turned out to see Silas McGraw claim his mail-order bride. If some whispered about the mismatch, the weathered rancher and the plain cook, their words carried no sting. Not when Silas looked at her like she hung the moon. Not when Ellie glowed with a happiness that transformed her whole being. That night, as they lay in their marriage bed legally bound at last, Silas traced lazy patterns on her bare skin. No regrets, only that it took so long to find you. He kissed her deeply, worth the wait. Every lonely year was worth it to have this, to have you. Outside, the coyotes sang their ancient songs, and the wind carried promises of rain. Inside, two people who'd thought love had passed them by discovered that sometimes the best things come to those who've learned to recognize treasure when it arrives, even in unexpected packages. The little house in the valley was no longer haunted by ghosts. It was filled instead with laughter, with the scent of baking bread and the warmth of new love. And in the kitchen, apple pies cooled on the windowsill, their sweet perfume a testament to the healing power of simple kindness and the magic that can grow between two wounded hearts brave enough to try again. The whispers started small, like tumbleweeds gathering before a storm. First at the general store, where Mrs. Pritchard held court among the pickle barrels and fabric bolts. That Hutchinson woman. Oh, excuse me. Mrs. McGraw now. Did you hear? She was run out of Millstown for trying to seduce her employer's son. No. Oh, yes. The Pemberton boy himself was in town last month. Told the whole sordid tale to anyone who'd listen. Said she threw herself at him, then cried assault when he refused her advances. The poison spread quickly through the small community. By the time Ellie arrived for the monthly supply run, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Eyes tracked her movements, and backs turned with deliberate insult. She kept her head high, selecting her purchases with steady hands despite the burning in her cheeks. But when she approached the counter, Mrs. Pritchard stepped back as if contamination might leap across the space between them. "I'll need Mr. Pritchard to handle your transaction," she said coldly. "I don't serve women of loose morals." The words hit like a physical blow. Ellie set her basket on the counter with careful control. "Then perhaps you'd prefer I take my business to Cedar Falls. I'm sure they'd welcome the regular custom of a ranch household." As if any decent establishment would. "What's the delay here?" Silas's voice cut through the tension. He'd been loading feed, but must have sensed trouble. His presence filled the doorway, solid and unmovable. Mrs. Pritchard's face went pale, then red. "Mr. McGraw, I was just explaining that perhaps your wife might be more comfortable shopping elsewhere. Is that so?" He moved to Ellie's side, his hand settling possessively on her waist. "And why would my wife be unwelcome in the only store for 50 miles? The woman's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Behind her, other customers shifted nervously. Everyone knew Silas McGraw's temper. Had heard what happened to Crawford. "There's been talk," someone ventured from behind the fabric display. "About her past, what she did in Millstown." "What she did?" Silas's voice dropped dangerously low. "You mean when she fought off a man who tried to force himself on her? When she lost her position for refusing to be some rich boy's plaything? That's not how Mr. Pemberton tells it. Mr. Pemberton is a liar and a coward who preys on women without protection." Silas pulled Ellie closer. "My wife is the most decent, hard-working, honorable person in this store. Anyone who says otherwise answers to me." Silence stretched taut. Then old Samuel Morrison, the town drunk, cackled from his corner. "McGraw's gone soft. Defending a mail-order embarrassment?" Silas started forward, but Ellie caught his arm. "No, they're not worth it. Listen to your woman. McGraw." Mrs. Pritchard found her courage again. "Take her home before decent folk have to—" "Decent folk?" Ellie's laugh was sharp as winter wind. "You mean the same decent folk who called Sarah McGraw a witch? Who refused to let a sick child into the doctor's house because of ignorant gossip? Those decent folk?" The store went tomb silent. No one had spoken Sarah's name in Silas's presence since the funeral. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Mrs." Pritchard whispered. "Don't I? I've heard the stories. How you all turned your backs on a good woman because she knew herb lore. How you let fear and jealousy poison you against anyone different." Ellie stepped forward, her voice gaining strength. "Well, I am different. I'm not pretty or delicate or whatever you think a woman should be, but I'm here, I'm staying, and I'm proud to be Mrs. Silas McGraw." She picked up her basket. "Head high. We'll take our business to Cedar Falls. I find the air there less poisoned." Silas followed her out, pausing at the door. "Spread your gossip, whisper your lies. But remember, my wife has my protection and my name. Cross her, and you cross me." They drove out of town in charged silence. Once they cleared the buildings, Silas pulled the wagon to a stop. "Ellie." "I'm fine." "You're crying." She touched her cheek, surprised to find it wet. "I thought I was stronger than this. Thought I'd grown past caring what small-minded people think. You are strong, strongest woman I know." He gathered her into his arms. "But words can still wound. I know that better than most. How do you stand it? The whispers, the judgment. I remember what matters. This," he gestured toward their valley. "The ranch, the work, you. Let them talk themselves hoarse. We know the truth. It's not that simple. Yes, it is." He cupped her face. "You're my wife. You make the best apple pie in the territory. You saved Moses from loneliness and me from worse. That's all that matters. Despite everything," she smiled, "you and that pie. It's how you caught me, stomach first, then heart." He kissed her gently. "Come on, let's go home." But the damage was done. Over the following days, the poison spread further. The preacher's wife crossed the street rather than speak to Ellie. The miller's daughter giggled and pointed when they passed. Even some of the ranch hands looked at her differently, speculation in their eyes. The breaking point came when Tom Brennan arrived with troubling news. "There's talk of a town meeting," he said over coffee. "Some fool notion about community standards and unwelcome elements. They can't run us out." Silas growled. "Not legally, no. But they can make life mighty hard. Refuse service. Shut you out of gatherings. Pressure folks not to do business with you. Let them try." "Silas." Ellie put a hand on his arm. "Maybe I should go." Both men turned to stare at her. "Not forever," she said quickly. "Just until this dies down. I could visit my sister in California." "No." Silas's response was immediate and fierce. "You're not running. We're not running." "I won't be the reason you lose everything you've built here. You think this ranch means more to me than you do?" He pulled her against him. "I'd burn it all down before I'd let you go." Tom cleared his throat. "There might be another way. The harvest dance is tomorrow. If you both attend, heads high, together, might remind folks that you're part of this community now. Hard to vilify someone when they're standing right there being normal folks. Or it gives them a chance to humiliate us publicly," Ellie pointed out. "Maybe, but hiding gives them power. Facing them takes it away." Silas looked at his wife. "Your choice. We stay home, or we dance. Either way, we do it together." Ellie thought of all the times she'd hidden, all the moments she'd made herself small to avoid notice. Then she thought of Sarah McGraw, dying while her neighbors whispered poison, and little Emma, turned away from help because of ignorant fear. "We dance." The next evening, Ellie stood before the mirror in her best dress, a deep blue calico that brought out her eyes. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair. "You look beautiful." Silas appeared behind her, handsome in his Sunday clothes. "I look like what I am, a plain woman in a made-over dress. You look like my wife, the woman I love, the woman I'm proud to stand beside." He kissed her neck. "Ready?" "No, but let's go anyway." The Grange Hall blazed with lanterns and music. They could hear the fiddles from the street, see couples whirling through the windows. At their entrance, the music didn't stop, but conversations did. A wave of silence followed them across the room. Silas's hand was steady on Ellie's back as they greeted Tom and Martha Brennan. Martha, bless her, embraced Ellie warmly and began chattering about preserving recipes as if nothing was amiss. "Would you like some punch?" Silas asked. Ellie nodded, though her throat felt too tight to swallow. He squeezed her hand and headed for the refreshment table, leaving her with the Brennans. That's when Constance Hartwell struck. The mayor's daughter, pretty and poisonous, glided over with her coterie of followers. "Mrs. McGraw, how brave of you to show your face." "Miss Hartwell." Ellie kept her voice steady. "We were just discussing community values, how important it is to maintain proper standards." Constance's smile was sharp as glass. "Of course, some people have different ideas about what's proper, don't they? Indeed, some people think cruelty is acceptable if wrapped in righteousness." Constance's eyes narrowed. "And some people think they can escape their past by running to the frontier. Tell me, does your husband know exactly what kind of woman he married? Or did you trick him like you tried to trick poor Mr. Pemberton?" The words were loud enough to carry. Nearby dancers slowed, sensing drama. Ellie felt the familiar urge to shrink, to flee. Then she saw Silas returning with drinks, saw his face darken as he registered the scene, and something in her snapped. "Yes, let's talk about tricks," she said, loud and clear. "Let's talk about Harold Pemberton, who cornered a servant girl in his father's study, who tore her dress and split her lip when she fought back, who then told everyone she'd seduced him to cover his shame." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Constance stepped back, but Ellie followed. "Let's talk about a woman who lost everything for refusing to be a victim, who came west with nothing but hope and found a good man who sees her worth. And let's talk about people so bitter and small they'd rather spread poison than celebrate love. How dare you?" "I dare because I'm done being ashamed of surviving." Ellie stood tall, every inch of her bearing proud. "I'm done apologizing for being strong instead of pretty, capable instead of delicate. I'm done letting petty people make me feel less than I am." Silas reached her side, setting down the glasses and taking her hand. "Well said." Ellie turned to him. "I'm sorry. I've ruined everything." "No." He pulled her into his arms right there in front of everyone. "You've said it right." He kissed her deeply, thoroughly, scandalously. When they parted, the hall was silent except for the crackling of lanterns. Then Martha Brennan started clapping. Tom joined her. Old Samuel Morrison, drunk as usual but surprisingly clear-eyed, stomped his feet in approval. One by one, others joined in, the young couples who understood love's trials, the older women who remembered their own struggles, the men who respected strength wherever they found it. Not everyone. Mrs. Pritchard huffed from the hall, followed by Constance and her group. But those who remained pressed forward to shake hands, to offer quiet words of support or apology. "Dance with me," Silas murmured in her ear. "People are still staring. Let them. I want everyone to see how proud I am to hold you." They took the floor as the fiddles resumed. Ellie had worried she wouldn't know the steps, but Silas guided her surely, his eyes never leaving hers. Around them, other couples joined in, and slowly the hall returned to celebration. "Thank you," she whispered as they turned. "For what?" "For standing by me, for not being ashamed." He spun her out and back, pulling her closer than proper. "I could never be ashamed of you. You're my heart, Ellie McGraw, my home, my everything." Later, as they walked to the wagon under a star-drunk sky, Ellie felt lighter than she had in weeks. Not everyone would accept them. Some minds were too small to change, but enough would. And more importantly, she'd found her voice, her strength, her place to stand. "No more running," she said as Silas helped her up. "Whatever comes, we face it here, together." "Together," he agreed, kissing her hand. "Always together." They drove home through the quiet night, Ellie tucked against Silas's side. Behind them, the town might whisper, but ahead lay their valley, their ranch, their life built on something stronger than gossip. Truth, love, and the best apple pie in the territory. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the valley in white silence. The first heavy snow caught them preparing, Silas reinforcing the barn roof while Ellie laid in supplies and canned the last of the garden's bounty. They worked in comfortable rhythm now, two people who'd learned each other's ways. One evening, as snow fell thick outside, Ellie stood at the kitchen window watching it accumulate. The world looked clean and new, all harsh edges softened. She pressed a hand to her belly, where a secret had been growing alongside the winter stores. "You'll catch cold standing there." Silas wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I love the snow. It makes everything look possible." "Even in this hard country?" "Especially here." She leaned back against him. "Silas, I need to tell you something." He tensed slightly. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She turned in his arms, taking his hands and placing them on her still flat stomach. "Everything's right. We're going to have a baby." The emotions that crossed his face were like watching weather change across the valley. Shock, fear, wonder, and finally, joy so profound it took her breath away. "A baby," he whispered. "You're sure?" "As sure as a woman can be. Come spring, this house will have a child in it again." He dropped to his knees right there on the kitchen floor, pressing his face against her belly. When he looked up, tears tracked down his weathered cheeks. "I'm scared," he admitted. "After Emma." "I know." She cradled his face in her hands. "But this is different. We're different. And this child will be born from love. Not duty, from choice, not expectation." He rose and kissed her deeply, then laughed, a sound of pure joy she'd never heard from him before. "A baby. Our baby. Our baby," she confirmed. That night, as they lay entwined, Silas couldn't stop touching her belly, whispering plans and promises to the life growing there. Ellie smiled in the darkness, feeling more complete than she'd ever imagined possible. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A wagon approached through the snow, and Ellie recognized the passengers with a start. Harold Pemberton's parents. Her blood ran cold, but she forced herself to remain calm as she called Silas from the barn. Mr. Pemberton Sr. was an older version of his son, same weak chin, same calculating eyes, but where Harold had been all bluster, his father carried himself with the quiet menace of established power. "Mr. McGraw, Mrs. McGraw." He didn't remove his hat, a calculated insult. "We need to discuss the lies your wife has been spreading about our son." "No lies were spoken," Silas said flatly. "Your son is what he is." Harold made a mistake, perhaps young men often do with willing women who later regret their choices. Ellie stepped forward, but Silas caught her arm. "Let me handle this." "No." She gently freed herself. "This is my fight too." She faced the older couple squarely. "Mrs." Pemberton sat in the wagon, her face a mask of genteel disgust. "Your son attacked me. Sir, that's not a mistake. That's a crime. The only mistake was mine, thinking anyone would believe a servant over a rich man's boy. You have no proof. I have bruises that lasted weeks. I have a torn dress I kept as reminder. I have my word, which meant nothing in your world but means everything here." She lifted her chin. "What do you want? Why come all this way?" "Mr." Pemberton's mask slipped, revealing the steel beneath. "Harold's engagement to Miss Worthington has been reinstated, contingent on clearing his name. You will write a letter retracting your accusations. You will state that you misunderstood his intentions, that you've exaggerated due to feminine hysteria." "I will do no such thing." "Then we'll ruin you, both of you. I have connections throughout the territory. No bank will lend to you. No merchant will trade with you. You'll be frozen out until you starve or surrender. Get off my land." Silas's voice was deadly quiet. "Think carefully. McGraw, your pride isn't worth—" Silas drew his rifle in one smooth motion. "I said get off my land. Now." "Mr." Pemberton paled but stood his ground. "This isn't over. You'll regret—" The shot split the winter air. Silas had fired into the ground at the horses' feet, sending them dancing. "Mrs." Pemberton shrieked. "The next one won't miss," Silas promised. "You've got 10 seconds." They left in a flurry of snow and threats. Ellie sagged against Silas, who pulled her close. "They'll make trouble," she said. "Let them try." "We've faced worse and survived." But the Pembertons' reach was long. Over the following weeks, small problems accumulated. The feed order came up short. The bank questioned their loan payment despite it being on time. The new ranch hand quit without explanation. Through it all, Ellie and Silas held steady. They had each other, their land, and the new life growing between them. When the pressures mounted, they remembered what mattered. One night, as a blizzard howled outside, Ellie taught Silas to feel the baby's first movements, tiny flutters like butterfly wings. His wonder made her laugh, which made the baby move more, creating a cycle of joy that pushed back the darkness. "I used to sit with Sarah like this," he said softly. "When she was carrying Emma, I was so young, so sure nothing could touch us." He kissed Ellie's temple. "I'm older now. I know how fragile life is, but I also know how strong we are together. Strong enough for anything. Anything." Spring came slowly, the snow retreating to reveal the land beneath. Their garden plot waited, rich with promise. The Pembertons' harassment had faded. Perhaps they'd found other targets, or perhaps they'd realized Silas and Ellie couldn't be moved. On a morning when the first wildflowers pushed through the mud, Ellie stood in the doorway, watching Silas work with a new colt. Her belly rounded now, the baby active and strong. She held a letter from her sister, congratulations, and promise of a visit after the birth. "You shouldn't be on your feet so much," Martha Brennan called, approaching with a basket. She'd become a regular visitor, bringing gossip and good cheer in equal measure. "Movement helps. This little one is restless." Martha smiled. "Takes after the father, then never could keep Silas still." She unpacked fresh bread and preserves. "Tom sends his regards. Says to tell Silas the new irrigation channel is working perfectly." They settled at the kitchen table, talking of small things, fabric for baby clothes, plans for expanding the chicken coop, the new school teacher who'd arrived from back east. "She's young, but seems capable," Martha reported. "Asked particularly about you." "Me?" Seems she heard about a woman who could read and write well, who'd once dreamed of teaching. Thought you might help with the younger children. Once the baby settled, Ellie's heart leaped. I couldn't, could I?" "Why not? Times are changing. Besides, you faced down the whole town at the harvest dance. Teaching a few letters seems simple after that." That evening, Ellie shared the possibility with Silas. He listened thoughtfully, then nodded. "You'd be good at it. Patient, kind, smart." He caressed her belly. "Our child will be lucky to have such a mother. And such a father. One who believes impossible things." "Like what?" "Like a plain woman being beautiful. Like second chances being better than first. Like apple pie being the way to a man's heart." He laughed, pulling her close. "All true things. The truest things I know." As the sun set over their valley, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, they sat on the porch Silas had built wider to accommodate a rocking chair. The land stretched before them, harsh still, demanding still, but theirs. In the distance, cattle lowed. Nearby, "The chicken settled for the night?" Moses dozed in his pen, content in his old age. "I've been thinking about names." Ellie said, "Oh, if it's a girl, Hope McGraw." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Sarah would have liked that. Emma too. And if it's a boy, you choose. Samuel, after my father, Samuel Silas McGraw. Strong name, good name." He kissed her hand. "For a child born of love and stubbornness and the best apple pie in the territory." She laughed, the sound carrying across the valley like a promise. Inside the house, another pie cooled on the windowsill. Not just food, but symbol of all they'd built. A life measured in small kindnesses and daily choices. A love grown not from passion alone, but from seeing each other clearly and choosing to stay. "I need to tell you something," Ellie said as stars began to appear. "Something I've never said aloud." Silas waited, patient as always. That morning I left Millstown. I thought my life was over, thought I'd used up all my chances at happiness. She turned to face him. I was wrong. My life was just beginning. Every hard mile that brought me here, every moment of doubt, it was all worth it, because it led me to you. Ellie, his voice roughened with emotion, let me finish. You gave me more than a home. Silas, you gave me myself, the woman I was meant to be. Strong, capable, loved. She placed his hand over her heart. This is where I belong. Here, with you, in this valley that tests us and shapes us and makes us who we are. He kissed her then, under the vast western sky, while their unborn child moved between them. Promise of future, proof of present, healing of past. Later, as they prepared for bed, Ellie took a final look out the window. The moon had risen, turning the world silver and shadow. In the distance, a coyote called, and another answered. Wild voices in the darkness, singing of survival and continuity. No regrets? Silas asked, wrapping his arms around her. None, not a single one. And it was true. The girl who'd fled east in shame had become a woman who stood tall in the west. The man who'd buried his heart with his family had found it beating again, stronger for the breaking. Together, they'd built something neither could have imagined. A love story written not in grand gestures, but in daily choices, in apple pies and garden dirt, in facing down gossip and choosing joy despite the pain. As sleep took them, the house settled around them with contented creaks. And somewhere in the kitchen, the recipe book lay open to apple pie, ready for another day, another chance to create sweetness from simple ingredients and patient love. Hope Hollow lived up to its name, cradling dreams that had found their way home at last. Thank you for joining us around the campfire for this tale of love, resilience, and second chances in the Old West. We'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. Just like Ellie's letter traveled to change her life forever. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of frontier romance and adventure. Share your thoughts about Silas and Ellie's journey. Did their love story touch your heart? Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunset.